Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa Ely, and today I am taking part in the Red Rover Art Challenge hosted by Dina Tollefson. So there is going to be some very pretty bright red in this painting, but it's going to be about the second color that I use because I started off this painting by tackling what I was most nervous about, which was the faces of these two characters. So I have had this idea in my head for a while of a female knight presenting her sword to a queen. It came up quite a while ago when I was irritated about some sexist something or other, and I wanted to paint two powerful women who were in cahoots with each other, and particularly wanted to draw a lady knight. And so that's the concept behind this. And then of course it was brought extra to my mind when there was a little Twitter happening recently when some idiot man decided to publicly spout his opinion that women can't use swords. This was his response to women using swords quite a lot in a new Netflix show called The Witcher, which is an adaptation of some short stories, which then became a video game, etc., etc. But because of the women being warriors and beating men occasionally in this show, some idiot sexist thought he needed to tell the internet that women can't use swords, which is of course incorrect. He didn't even know the actual weight of an average sword, which is about 2 to 3 pounds. He thought they were 7 pounds. For one, there are all sorts of different types of swords, and they weigh different amounts. The types of swords being used in The Witcher are mainly short swords, but clearly not comprehending that women can be stronger than men. It depends on how much one works out. But the strongest woman is stronger than the average men. And anyway, that's not how swords work, and so there were a lot of responses to him, but one of the responses has been a lot of people creating art and promoting stories about women who use swords or other weapons. And so that brought this further to the forefront of my mind, and also I've been working on this sketch more recently. Oh, by the way, I tend to watch a lot of YouTube while I paint, particularly booktubers, because I can just listen to them and I don't have to see what they're doing, as opposed to art tubers. And so I was listening to Troy Towell while I was doing part of this painting. What do you guys like to listen to or watch while you paint? Let me know in the comments. And then when the Red Rover Challenge was announced, I decided that it would be really cool if I did this for that, and the red part was the queen having a bright, bright all red dress. And so the concept behind and the idea of what's going on here is there is a lady knight probably re-pledging her allegiance to this queen, or newly pledging it because the queen has just come to power, because I think this knight has been a knight for quite a while. She's well trained, she's got a full suit of armor, she knows what she's doing. So and I think she's a native of the country that this queen is ruling, so some kind of new ceremony is going on here to re-pledge or pledge to a new sovereign her sword. And in my mind, they are friends, have known each other for quite a while, and so the lady knight is happy to be pledging her service to her friend, and her friend is happy to be receiving it. And one of the things that I enjoy in paintings is making facial expressions quite subtle. So I tried to do that here. I myself tend to make fairly subtle facial expressions. It was a thing I kind of trained myself to do when I was a kid because I had social anxiety, but also a lot of autistic people don't make expressions that exactly suit their emotions. So I've just been really interested in micro expressions for a long time, and so I really like to make people look as if they're sort of restrained. They've restrained their emotions, and when they're very happy, it's communicated by a slight smile and by their eyes being a certain way. And I'm really interested in that, so I was glad to further explore that with this painting of two characters looking at each other with affection and happiness, but it being fairly restrained because they're in a formal environment. I only put these 2 characters in it, but in my imagination they are probably having a public ceremony and there are other people around where the viewer is and behind the Lady Knight who are observing this ceremony. There may have also been several other knights who have been doing the same thing in order, and so this is like a great hall type of a place, which is why as I'm working on the background I am putting in several stained glass windows, which you will see the stained glass part of soon. But I really wanted to look kind of castle-y and fantastical, but also keeping with my style of semi-realism. But I also went quite dull and washed out with the colors of the background because I wanted the 2 main figures to really pop out and be the main focus of everything. So despite having a medium amount of detail in the background, I really wanted all the focus to be on the characters and just have the background be the setting and give you more of an idea of what's going on in the picture. And there were 2 things that I was especially nervous, well, more like 3 things that I was especially nervous about this painting. One was getting the skin tones and the faces right. One was getting the hair right, and one was getting the armor of the knight right, because I struggle to do armor. I struggle to do anything metallic, so I was quite nervous about that. Here I am working on the hair, and I was very nervous about it, but I used a lot of references, and for the Queen's hair specifically, I referenced Shuri's hair from the Black Panther because I really like her tiny braids and the way she styled them, and as I was looking at her closer, I realized that she actually has several other colors in her hair besides black. Black is the predominant color, but she also has some yellows and oranges in there, so I decided to add that to my Queen's hair, and I thought it looked really pretty. So I'm really happy with how both of these characters' hair turned out. I wanted to give them both the tiny braid style because it's a natural hairstyle for Black women that isn't straightening, that kind of keeps with the idea behind the Black Panther hairstyles, which was to let Black women have their own hair without having to change it to fit in more with Western society. And so I wanted to give them both those braids, but one of them has their hair semi-down, and one of them has it all tied up because she's a warrior and she has to have it out of the way so that she can fight without people grabbing her hair. This is a woman warrior, deal with it type of a thing. And so I had a lot of fun working on the hair, and it really turned out better than I thought it would. As I said, I was very nervous, and so I'm really glad that it turned out so well because I didn't really know what I was doing. I haven't drawn anyone with these tiny braids before. The sword I decided to make very simple. It's not exactly the centerpiece of this. I really like drawing fancy swords with all sorts of gilt and hilts that are really fancy, but the sword is partially the centerpiece, but it's more a symbol and supposed to be a warrior's weapon rather than a ceremonial sword. And so I wanted to keep it rather simple so that the focus would be on the relationship between the 2 women rather than on the fancy weapon. Now, about her armor, I did the base layer by doing gray and 1 layer of gray and then 1 wash of sparkly blue over the top of it. And I kept the blue to mainly one side of her where I wanted the light to be coming from, so it would seem like it was that was the shiny side that had the light reflecting on it, because the light for this piece I decided I wanted to become from above and between the 2, so the light would be coming on both of their faces. And so I put more of the sparkly blue towards the front and top of the knight's armor, and then later you will see me add some shadows to the other side of her armor, which I think really helped, really made it pop and made it look a lot more metallic, and I'm really happy with that because, as I said, I've been very bad at making metallic things in the past, so I'm really glad that I finally figured out how to do it. I used a lot of references and then I just kind of guessed, so I'm glad that it worked out. I also based her armor on a very simple design. I do really like fancy armor, just like I like fancy swords, but once again I wanted it to mainly be the focus of what's going on between the 2 women rather than on fancy schmancy armor. Also, I wanted the armor to be sort of workaday and armor that this lady would wear into battle rather than ceremonial garb. But of course she is in full plate armor, which is pretty heavy armor. And then on her arms she just has chainmail because it's a lot lighter and less hot. More about their faces. I did so many layers on the faces. You've seen several layers, but I also did several not on camera, partially because I feel less nervous when I'm not on camera, which is silly because I can cut it out at any point. But maybe because I don't have to make sure that the lighting's good and the camera angle's good, but I just feel a little more casual and more like free to mess up when the camera's not on. And so I did a few more layers without the camera and I felt less nervous and I was able to experiment some more and figure out how to make the faces right. And basically I just added shadows under the neck and behind the jawline, and I was trying to add some shadows under the noses, but that just did not work out, so I gave up on that and just added highlights to the nose, forehead, and cheekbones. Because as I said, the light is coming onto the front of their faces, and so I decided to put highlights there, and I think that worked out really well. I'm really happy with that. I don't feel like I've been very successful with the adding of shadows and dimension to faces before, so I'm really glad. I feel like I've taken a step forward. I feel like I did more on their faces in this painting than I've been able to do in previous ones, so I'm very happy with that. And so for the line art, I first started out trying to do the outline on the armor with a black pen, and I haven't tried to use a black pen to do outlining for quite a while, and I had forgotten just how severe it looks. So I had to scrub that off with some water and water it down so that it looked more like gray, and then I switched out to my gray outliner pen, which actually matched with it really well. I didn't even have to redo the outline on that part of her shoulder armor. And so that worked out. I was able to do a little patch to that. And for her chainmail, I just made little rings, and that's it. Little overlapping rings. And then later I put on some highlights with white gel pen because it's going to be just as shiny in its individual little bits as the rest of her armor. And on the red dress, I did some outlining with a dark red, and then I also added some little detailing to her sleeve and her gold belt with a sparkly yellow pen, and I'm happy with how that worked out as well. And for both faces, I used the dark gray pen again for outlining, and then used the black pen for the eyelashes just to give them a little extra pop. And then I did white outlining on the nose because instead of dark outlining, because that's where the highlight was. And I'm really happy with that and that I feel like that kind of worked out. And then a little bit of white highlighting on the lips too, as well as the eyes, to give a little shine to that side of the face. And then white gel pen on the armor on the shiny side and on the sword. And then all I had left to do was the stained glass, which I did in pieces. As you can see, different colors at different times. I did them in separate bits because I wanted to, in order to try to get a glass look, I used a whole lot of water, a lot of pigment, but also a lot of water, and so that the pigment would sort of move around kind of like it does in really old glass and make sort of rumpled looks. And so it took a long time to dry, so I had to wait a long time between doing those parts. Oh, and I also did some gold paint pen on the Queen's crown thing. It's based on kind of the elvish chain crowns. It's not exactly what I envisioned, but I had a hard time, and I was also very nervous about covering up her hair that I liked so much. So it's not exactly what I wanted, but I'm still happy with it, especially after I added the little ruby pendant at the front that's dripping over her forehead. And then the last step on the stained glass was to put in the grooves between whatever that is, soldering, whatever that's called, the black stuff, and after I put that on, I feel like it really came together, and I'm really happy with the stained glass. I was a little concerned about it for a while there. And then I just did some cleanup bits of where I'd speckled paint when I was concentrating on something else. And that's the end of this piece. Please check out the rest of the people taking part in the Red Rover Art Challenge. It's really cool, and Dina Tollefson will be linked below. Thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Bye!